Hey guys, so the prosecution finished its cross-examination of Sam Bankman-Fried, and the defense also finished their what's called redirect when they kind of I don't know, just ask questions meant to sort of rebut the cross-examination. I arrived late because trying to get in the courtroom yesterday wrecked me in terms of like how basically late on Sunday night I had to wake up as if it were Monday morning and make it to the courthouse to get in there. But even though I arrived late this morning and I had intended to try to get in, I'm glad that I did make the effort because, like I said, it all ended very quickly, and now the jury has been sent home, and there's going to be what's called a charge conference where they discuss the instructions that the jury will get. So I'm going to give you some of the highlights of the cross-examination. Honestly, in the overflow room, there were moments when we laughed because some of the questions that Danielle Sassoon asked were a little bit outrageous in the sense, well, frankly, also Sam Bankman-Fried's responses to them. So she started by kind of showing that he had showed favoritism to the Bahamas by telling some of the regulators, like, oh, we segregated the customer assets for Bahamian customers, so if they want to withdraw, like, they can go ahead. But, then when the redirect happened, they pointed out that Sam and his lawyer pointed out that he had said, like, if you want that, he didn't just say, like, we're going to do this. Anyway, so the prosecutor, she said things like, in September, October 2022, you knew that FTX customer money was being used for VC investments and didn't disclose it to your customers, to FTX customers. Then there was a string here, so you guys are going to figure out just how not great my handwriting is, but then there was a string of questions that in the end sort of ended up being kind of funny. She said, in substance, you didn't tell your Alameda employees not to spend FTX customer money. At no point did you tell them to hold the FTX customer funds for them. You didn't tell them to segregate the funds. You didn't put in place any instructions to keep that money safe. But you told Congress you made sure to segregate them to keep them safe. So that was a string of questions. Similar to yesterday, he sort of quibbled with the wording. He didn't answer directly, stuff like that. There was a moment where she talks about that time when he says that he learned in June of 2022 that $8 billion of FTX customer money had been spent, and she asked, like, who spent it? And then he, I think, said, like, he didn't ask because he was focused on, like, the solution or something like that. And so she wrote, when you were CEO of FTX, in your testimony, you said that you didn't know who spent $8 billion, and people laughed in the overflow room. And then she said, you didn't call in your deputies and employees to ask who spent $8 billion. And then he said, well, I had conversations with Caroline Ellison, and she said, did you ask her who spent $8 billion? And then he said, I asked, how did it happen? And then she said, did you fire anyone for spending $8 billion of FTX customer deposits? Anyway, so that went on. There were a lot of these. I mean, like I said yesterday, it was relentless and brutal, very similar. Maybe because we knew what to expect. It was not like the first time it had that first part of the cross-examination before lunch yesterday, like, had me with a feeling of being shocked or something. I mean, I guess I could have expected it, but by now it's like we're a little bit used to it. She got him to agree that there were certain big investments that he had approved. Certain ones he wouldn't admit to, but I'm talking here about like K5, Anthropic, real estate, and saying like, they're not margin trades. And then she poked holes in when he talked about how he discovered this Fiat ad account, which I guess was at the time of that June 22 meeting when he said that Caroline came to the FTX hut and said, oh, I think Alameda might be bankrupt. And in his version of the story, he says that it took them a few hours to like figure out what was wrong, and that he had thought that Alameda was borrowing $2 billion, and after that he realized it was $10 billion, and that there was this Fiat ad account that had $8 billion of liabilities in it. And so the prosecutor said, you didn't ask what is this Fiat ad bug that had an $8 billion liability? Because I think he like said later that he didn't really look into it at that time or something. And she said, so the prosecutor said, your testimony is that, because he said, oh, you know, they were busy working on it, so, you know, they told me like not to ask questions. And she said, your testimony is that your supervisees told you, the CEO, or told you, the owner, to not ask questions. And again, people were laughing at these, at least in the overflow room. And then she said, you had no interest in understanding an $8 billion bug. And she emphasized that, you know, he said he had canceled a trip to DC about this. And then he was like, oh, but, you know, after they realized that Alameda wasn't insolvent, then I, you know, decided to keep going. Then, let's see, there was another section that I wanted to, oh yeah. So there were more things, and we'll give it to you later on the pod, but basically, at the very end, she went through like kind of the time after the bankruptcy when, you know, he was giving all these media interviews, but also like news was dripping out that, you know, Gary and then Caroline had begun cooperating with the government and stuff like that. And there, like the agreement for Nishad was a bit delayed. And it came out, I don't remember, but it came out like more like January or February, something like that. And so then she brought out a document where I guess he had written, so she asked him, like, you weren't surprised that you didn't learn about Nishad at that time? And then she pulled up that same document that he'd written where he had said, like, you know, should I try calling the broker that the Hood shares are with to see if they'll just hand them over to me? And so I couldn't write this all down. She said it so quickly, and I was not anywhere near the monitors. The overflow room was like packed, so I'm like super far in the back. But basically, he, you know, mentions something about Nishad and is like kind of, what's the word, surmising like what's going on. And so he says like, oh, the complaints say that there were 3 co-conspirators, you know, but like there was no mention of Nishad. Like, so I forget the phrasing, but it's something like, are they keeping a seat warm for Nishad or something like that? And then he's like, then the next bullet was also, there's no plea deal, nothing yet. The next bullet was like, so what does this mean? And then his last thing is like a four, like, you know, number 4 or D or whatever was like something else. Like he's like trying to figure out what's going on. Like why hasn't the government said anything about Nishad? And that was how she ended it. And I wrote like DS's, meaning Danielle Sassoon's mic drop. You know, here he is like surmising like, oh, we're the co-conspirators, but why is it that Nishad, there's no word about Nishad being a co-conspirator? So, I mean, that was interesting. Now it is the redirect, or afterward it was the redirect by Cohen, and of course they're recasting a lot of the stories. There were a few points where in the prosecution's cross-examination they mentioned certain things, but when Sam said, well, you know, the explanation is slightly different, then Danielle Sassoon wouldn't allow him to elaborate, and so the defense allowed him to do that. I'll have to give you more details about that later. This video is already getting long. Last bits are that there is not going to be any rebuttal from the government. They had an argument again about dragging up the guy from Texas, the Google guy, about the metadata, because I guess there was some document, and I don't know, the defense and the prosecution were fighting about it. And then they resolved that, so we don't have to sit through that crazy metadata thing that was like completely useless like last time. And so yeah, so now this afternoon we'll be going over, the judge and the lawyers will be hashing out the instructions for the jury. So anyway, that's the update. Thanks for checking in.